Aries, you can feel it, can't you? Something isn't right, something off, lingering beneath the surface, a quiet whisper of intuition, subtle yet loud enough that you can't ignore it, as if someone is secretly speaking your name behind your back, with an intention your heart already sensed, long before your mind could make sense of it. And yes, on September 15, two people are quietly plotting to block your path. This isn't just a warning, it's a wake-up call for a soul that no longer lets the dark lead the way, and to truly understand who's hiding in that darkness, we have to go back to where the masks were first put on. There are stories only the soul can understand, stories that don't begin with a scream, but with warm hugs, gentle check-ins, and people who once stood beside you, who, one day, quietly became the ones who set the trap. Aries, you are the first fire in the zodiac. You carry the power of beginnings, of courage, of light bursting through when the world is still wrapped in fog. And because of that light, you trust easily. You don't know how to pretend, so it's hard for you to see when someone else is wearing a mask. But not all traps are set by enemies. Some are disguised as love, wrapped in concern, in shared silence, in eyes that know how to listen, and hands that know exactly when to hold you, right when you're at your weakest. It might be someone who once sat beside you on a cold, windy night, saying things that made you feel like they understood every wound inside you. It might be someone who once said, "You don't have to be strong in front of me." And you believed them, you opened your heart, you told them things you've never dared to say to anyone else. But then, one day something felt off, not obvious, just subtle. The way their eyes avoided yours when you spoke the truth. A half joke that left a sting and no space to respond. A piece of advice that sounded wise, but made you doubt yourself more than feel seen. Aries, when you trust someone, you trust with your whole being. No tests, no conditions, no second guessing. You love as if your soul has never been broken, and that is exactly what makes you vulnerable. On September 15, the universe will begin to peel back the masks, not to make you angry, not to hurt you again, but to help you see when and where you began dimming your own light, just to keep a connection that only exists when you're not truly yourself. There are two people involved, Aries, not in a loud, obvious way, not like the villains in the movies, but quietly, behind the curtain, pretending it's love. One plays the victim, always making you feel sorry, always pulling your heart to protect them. The other acts like the wise one, offering advice that always somehow makes you feel small, incomplete. One makes you stretch yourself thin to save them. The other makes you shrink just so you don't outshine them, and slowly, you start to forget who you are. You start to believe you need to tone it down, to be less fire, more reasonable, more likable, just to be loved. But the deepest wound isn't the manipulation. The deepest wound is the moment you began to doubt yourself because you loved them. You thought it was your fault. You tried to fix it. You tried to keep the peace. You tried to believe the best in them, but deep down, your soul no longer felt safe. The light inside you whispered, something's not right, but you stayed quiet because you didn't want to lose them. Aries, kindness is not a wide open door for everyone to walk through. You are light, and that light must be protected, not with walls, but with awareness. If you're listening to this and something inside you is going still, if someone comes to mind, someone who makes you feel like you're not yourself when you're around them, just know this, your soul already knew, and the universe is on your side. The holiest moment is not forgiveness. It's realizing you've forgiven too many people who never planned to change. You don't need to call it out. You don't need to confront anyone. You just need to see it clearly, because all light begins with truth. And when that light starts to shine into the dark corners, you'll be surprised by what you've been overlooking. That's when a new door opens in your mind. Not the door of revenge, but the door of intuition, finally coming back to guide you. So if there's ever been a time when you felt something was wrong but you couldn't explain it, maybe now is the moment to finally listen to the silent warning your soul has been whispering all along. There are moments when the truth doesn't come like thunder. It comes like a whisper, soft as the wind inside your chest. No one sees it, no one hears it, only you and your soul, the only witness standing there, watching everything unfold in silence. Aries, have you ever sat across from someone and suddenly felt your heart sink, even as they smiled at you? Have you ever received advice that sounded caring, but somehow made you feel like you weren't enough? Maybe they didn't say anything wrong. Maybe their words were gentle, Their hand still held yours, and they asked you, "Are you okay?" But deep down, your heart tightened. Your soul took a small step back. You felt something wasn't right. That right there was your intuition speaking. No drama, no panic. Just a blink of the eye, a stillness in your mind in the middle of a normal conversation, a brief pause in their gaze, a sentence that seemed halfway hidden. You might have brushed it off. Didn't want to be too sensitive. You chose to believe in kindness. You didn't want to lose the connection. And maybe you told yourself, maybe I misunderstood. But Aries, your heart doesn't lie. It always knows before the mind can catch up. And that unease you carried with you after walking away from that moment was not random. It was your soul saying, be careful. But you smiled politely. You chose to see the good. You remembered the past, what they once did for you, and you chose silence. I'm not saying you were wrong. No, you were just a soul full of compassion, and compassion sometimes walks you straight through the most painful truths. Here's something real: the most vulnerable people aren't weak. They simply see the good in others before they see the danger. They choose to believe not because they are naive, but because they hope others believe in them the same way. But God, the divine who always watches from afar, will not let you stay in falsehood for too long. He loves you too much to let you sleep in a toxic dream. So he sends the signs, a strange vibration, a sentence that doesn't quite match the moment, a dream that keeps repeating, a deep exhaustion you can't explain. Every time you leave a certain person, you call it a feeling. I call it the instinct of light, because light cannot live too long in the dark without getting hurt. Because your soul, Aries, was never meant to be surrounded by fake kindness wrapped in ribbons of family or friendship. Maybe you're thinking, I tried, I was patient, I gave them another chance. And I believe you, but if every chance you give takes another piece of your light, then maybe it's time to stop. Not everyone who was once close deserves a front row seat to your soul. Not every gentle voice carries true kindness. Not every I love you is unconditional. Real love doesn't make you feel small. It makes you stand taller, speak clearer, and love yourself louder. Aries, you felt this, haven't you? Long ago, but you've been trying not to judge. You wanted to be fair, you wanted to give them time. You wanted to believe everyone can grow. That's noble. But sometimes, letting go is not about rejecting others. It's about accepting this truth. God has already shown you enough. The truth doesn't need to scream. It just needs you to stop denying it. And when you begin to listen, not just with your ears, but with your heart, your gut, your entire energetic field, you'll realize every time you feel uneasy in a relationship, without knowing why, is the universe gently placing a hand on your shoulder and saying, "It's okay, my child. You don't have to stay here anymore." Not all lessons come through failure. Some come wrapped in long silence, and a gut feeling no one can confirm except you. And when you choose to trust your intuition, you're not just choosing the truth, you're choosing yourself. That's when something sacred awakens inside you. Not a loud kind of strength that demands to be heard, but a quiet power that knows what's no longer meant for you. And in that moment, the universe will stop whispering. It will move. No warning, no noise. The truth will make itself known in a way so clear, you'll no longer be able to pretend you didn't see it, because by then it won't be a gut feeling anymore. It will be confirmation. And when that confirmation comes, it will leave no space for deception. It will open a door that can't be closed. A door that, once you walk through, you'll never see life with the same eyes again. Nothing lasting is ever built on a lie. Aries, sometimes the truth doesn't knock. It doesn't wait for an invitation. It doesn't come when it's convenient. The truth walks in like a cold wind in the middle of summer. It wakes up a part of you you've tried so hard to keep asleep for too long. A message sent to the wrong person, a careless slip of the tongue, a look they couldn't control when your name came up. Sometimes that's all it takes. Just one fragment, one tiny sign, and the whole mask falls apart. You don't need proof. You don't need a confession, because when the real light comes, it doesn't knock politely. It kicks the door wide open, and it enters with a quiet kind of holiness, sent straight from the universe. Maybe you're sitting in a cafe, sipping your coffee. Maybe you're cleaning the house and stumble on an old text. Maybe you're praying in silence, and suddenly you just know. No one said anything. No one confirmed it, but your soul already knew. And today, you finally let yourself admit it. Truth doesn't need witnesses. When it's ripe, it falls by itself. And you, Aries, you are no longer who you used to be. You won't scream, you won't sob, you won't break things. You'll just stand there in your own light and say nothing, because sometimes the clearest vision is the loudest act of all. You'll realize you no longer blame anyone, you just let go. Because the real pain was never in the truth itself. It was in how long you had to live, under the shadow of a beautiful lie. Aries, you don't need revenge. You don't need to prove you were right. You don't need to tell anyone how deeply you were hurt. Because the moment you walk away from the lie, you are practicing the highest form of spiritual power, forgiveness without return. And that forgiveness is not because they deserve it, it's because you do. You deserve freedom. You've gone far enough to know that only truth can nourish the soul. Lies, they shrink the heart, until you no longer recognize yourself in the mirror. Now imagine yourself standing in a room full of light after the storm has passed. You're soaked, you're tired, but for the first time you see everything clearly. The faces you once thought were light now reveal their true colors. They no longer glow, but they also no longer have power over you. You're not angry because you understand. Those who act from darkness must eventually face the darkness inside themselves. You don't need to judge. God saw everything, and in the sacred silence, He is already moving. Truth did not come to hurt you. It came to unlock you. It is the final key to a door you thought you'd be trapped behind forever. And when you walk out of that old room, you're not just leaving a relationship. You're leaving an old version of yourself, the one who accepted less than what you truly deserved. Aries, when you start seeing things as they are, you stop feeling regret. You start feeling light. You no longer care to hear their side of the story. You just want to live your truth. No more fake smiles while your heart is breaking inside. No more pleasing someone you don't believe in anymore. No more dimming your light just to hold on to something that's already rotted from within. You'll come to understand this truth was never your enemy. Pretending was. And from the moment you choose to see, you begin to live again. Your soul is finally free. You no longer need someone to say, "I'm sorry," because you already forgave by choosing a road that no longer includes them. And in that moment, you didn't fall apart. You came home. And when you return to your original self, your sacred flame, something beautiful happens. Peace no longer comes from others. It rises from the light you've reclaimed inside. But to keep that peace, you must now ask yourself a deeper question. Who has been silently protecting you through this entire journey, and why? You were never truly alone the way you once believed. You don't always know when you're being protected. Some days it feels like you're walking alone on a dry and empty road. No one beside you, not a sound around. You look up at the sky and wonder, is God even listening? You didn't pray, you didn't speak, but your soul whispered for help through the weight of exhaustion. And without knowing it, a presence had already started walking toward you, long before you needed saving. Archangel Michael doesn't come in like a storm. He doesn't scream. He doesn't strike lightning across the sky. He comes when you start looking at yourself in silence and feel something breaking, but also something being reborn. Michael is the protector of light, not the loud kind of light, but the quiet kind, the kind that flickers in your heart every time you choose truth, even if it costs you a relationship. He carries no sword of steel. His weapon is the light of awareness. It's the awakening you've been stepping into one breath at a time. You didn't ask for anything, but every time you said no to something that made you feel small, every time you turned away from a sweet lie, every time you stood up for your true emotions, a karmic bond was cut. A new current began to flow. You thought you were letting something go, but really, you were holding on to yourself. Aries, you have no idea how many times you were saved from something worse just because your gut told you, don't go that day, don't answer that message, don't explain anymore. That wasn't coincidence. That was a whisper from a higher soul, an invisible hand pulling you back because it saw what you couldn't. I know, you're not someone who likes relying on the unseen. You move, you act, you blaze ahead. But spiritual protection isn't here to hold you back. It's here to protect the brightest part of you from what isn't worthy of your light. You're not here to reshape yourself, just to fit into a distorted world. You weren't born to be trapped in relationships that only exist if you silence your truth. And Archangel Michael, he didn't come to teach you how to fight. He came to teach you. You don't need to fight at all when you truly know who you are and what no longer belongs to you. Maybe you once tried to prove it, that you're good, that you're worthy, that you're enough to be kept. But then you grew tired, you let go, and in the moment you let go, the protection arrived. No one enters your light unless you invite them. No one stays unless they can handle its truth. He clears out stagnant energy, cuts cords you never knew were tied, not with rage, but with light, not with revenge, but with full withdrawal. You are not responsible for someone else's healing. You are only responsible for not abandoning your own. You thought protection came after the prayer, but it began. The moment you stopped accepting what no longer served you, that's when your soul sent out a signal that needed no words, just stillness, just a quiet nod to yourself, and that's when he arrived, soft as a breath, but strong as 1,000 unspoken prayers. From here on, people who no longer align will start to fall away. Conversations will grow clearer. Events that once felt random will begin arranging themselves into a higher order, a divine order no one can control. You're not chasing anymore. Everything is beginning to move toward you, like water finding its way back to the sea. And if you're wondering, what's waiting for me after all this letting go? The answer isn't in what you've lost. It's in the gift that's finally arriving. The one the universe has been waiting to deliver. If only you dare to release what no longer fits. Not everything that slips out of your hands is a loss. Some doors close, not because you're not enough, but because you're too bright to stay there. Aries, you've just walked through a tough stretch. You had to let go. You had to watch the truth break wide open, right in your hands. You had to learn to forgive without ever hearing "I'm sorry." And you had to keep walking, even when your heart was still soaked in tears. That wasn't failure. That was a spiritual exam. A moment designed not to test your patience, but to ask, are you ready for an entirely new chapter? Because only when you rise above the fog of old emotions, only when you look up and say to God, I don't know what's ahead, but I trust your light, only then does the gate of destiny quietly open. You're not being punished. You're being trained. You're not being rejected. You're being preserved for the right time, just like a seed. It doesn't bloom in the middle of a storm, but silently grows roots beneath the soil. So when the warm sun returns, it rises stronger than anyone could imagine. Aries, a door that once slammed shut in your face, will now open on its own. No need to knock again, because now you've stepped out of the old energy where every wrong relationship, blind hope, and fear of being left behind has been released. I'm talking about a new invitation. A project that once felt dead suddenly breathes with more inspiration than ever. A person who went silent returns just when you least expect it. A stream of money and opportunity, a beam of light, emerges from a place you never thought to look. And you know what? The real miracle isn't that the door opened, it's that you have changed. You no longer walk through it with wide eyes and shaky hands. You walk in as someone who knows they are worthy. You no longer ask yourself, am I too much, too little, too different? Now you know that your difference is what makes you irreplaceable. You no longer squeeze into spiritual clothes that were stitched for the masses. You choose to wear your light, tailored, honest, whole. And from that courage, everything begins to flow back to you. Money doesn't come as something to chase anymore. It comes as a natural result of the energy you radiate. Opportunities no longer feel like isolated miracles. They feel like the loving response of a universe that's been watching you this whole time. Aries, you're on the edge of a harvest, not a harvest from blind effort, but one from integrity, because you've been honest with your heart. You've admitted what no longer fits. You've quietly stepped away from what no longer shines. And you didn't lose yourself, even when everything around you begged you to become someone easier to control. And that is why the reward is coming. A reward not only in the form of money, though your finances will shift. The real reward is peace. It's the knowing that you're no longer living in the wrong place, playing the wrong role, loving the wrong person. You'll feel it. Everything begins to move in the right direction. What once felt stuck now flows like a quiet stream after the rain. What once confused you now becomes clear, bathed in the light of new awareness. And if you're wondering, can I really open my heart to receive all this good? The answer is, not only can you were made for it, but along this journey, there's one part of you that's often been forgotten, your heart. That heart has been tired. It's loved the wrong ones, trusted the wrong ones, given to the wrong ones. But tell me, does it still have room for real love? Because beyond the door of luck and golden chances, there's a softer gift waiting, not something to conquer, but something to live in, to love in, to connect in for real. There are nights when you sit in silence, not waiting for a message, not hoping for anyone to knock on the door of your heart, not because you've grown cold, but because you once loved so deeply. You lost yourself in the process, and now all you want is to be whole again, just you as you truly are. Aries, how many times have you whispered the word love with a heart full of longing? You loved like sacrifice was the only way to go deep. You loved like enduring pain meant proving your worth. You loved and forgot that real love never asks you to shrink. You've been in a connection where you had to dim your light just so the other person wouldn't feel small. You've smiled when your heart wanted to cry. You've apologized just to keep a bond alive, even when you knew it no longer reflected who you are. But you made it through. You rose from that heartbreak without closing your heart. You didn't shut down. You simply rewrote your definition of love. You've learned how to love, not because you're afraid of being alone, but because you now understand. Real love doesn't drain you. It lets you be. It brings you peace. It makes you feel clear and enough. Aries, the one you're waiting for, won't come to melt you. They will come to grow with you. They won't keep you anxious in uncertainty. They will keep you calm in trust. You won't have to guess what they mean because they'll speak from the heart. You won't need to text first because they'll be reaching for you just like you're reaching for them. They're the kind of person you can sit in silence with and feel no pressure to perform. They'll understand your quiet isn't cold, it's depth. They won't ask you to change a thing because they love your light exactly as it shines. And if you haven't met them yet, maybe it's because you're meeting yourself first. Sometimes the one we most need to heal is ourselves, the version of you that once traded your worth just to hold on to someone who never deserved you, the heart that stayed silent out of fear of hurting someone else, the soul that shrank itself to fit into a box called safety. But now you're expanding. You're no longer living small. You're stepping out, one breath, one step into the rebirth of a heart that's learning to heal itself. And when you are full, love won't be something you have to chase. It will recognize you, will arrive like a gentle stream, not forced, not loud, just right. That person, or maybe the new you, will remind you. Love isn't about giving until you're empty. It's about giving and still having more. It's about sharing without losing yourself. It's about walking together without dissolving into each other. You'll see. One look can say more than 100 promises. One hand reaching for yours, not to hold you down, but to lift you higher. True love doesn't come to make you fear losing it. It comes to help you realize, when two souls are whole, neither needs to be chained to stay close. Aries, you deserve that kind of love, a love that doesn't ask you to choose between your heart and your mind, that never asks you to dim your light just to be accepted, a love that, when it finally arrives, you don't feel like you have to try, you just feel like, finally I see it. And sometimes, the most beautiful part of love isn't when it walks in, but when you finally realize. You're ready to receive it, not from fear, but from faith. When your heart opens, not because it's empty, but because it's full, something miraculous happens. What belongs to you will find its way to you, not too late, not too soon, but in perfect timing, as if sent by God. Just one more thing. After all the light and all the pain, after everyone who came and went, what's the final lesson? What truly remains? After you've made it through the storm and you're standing in the stillness of your very first peace, you don't need a loud explosion to mark the end, just one clear look, one truth that shines bright, and one quiet decision deeply rooted in peace. Aries, you don't have to shout how much you've endured, how long you've waited, how deeply you've sacrificed. You only need to stand still, tall, steady, and from the deepest part of your soul, say a few soft yet honest words. I deserve a peaceful life. No more forced apologies, no more clinging to something that's already rotted at the core. No more trading your dignity for a patchwork kind of love. No more. September 15 isn't a day of loss. It's the day you get your clear vision back, when you finally see what you were too afraid to face. And in that moment, you'll understand. You don't need to fight to prove the truth. The truth stands on its own. You only need to walk forward and let the light within you lead the way. You've walked through a season of the soul. Every step was a quiet letting go. Every silence, a lesson. And every time you chose truth over performance, you removed another mask from your face and from the faces of those who once stood beside you with twisted intentions. This isn't an ending. It's not a painful goodbye. It's the moment you choose yourself with clarity, calm, and self-respect. This is the beginning of a new rhythm, a life where you no longer suffocate your true feelings just to maintain a connection that lost its truth, a life where you no longer shrink yourself to fit someone else's expectations, a life where you finally breathe in the fresh air you've reclaimed from within, a life where you no longer seek love from pity or validation from people who never truly saw your soul. You won't need to rush. You won't need to fill the silence with someone else, because for the first time in many hard seasons, that silence isn't empty, it's sacred space. A space for you to grow from your own awakening. You're no longer the same person, not the soul that chases approval, fears abandonment, or carries the emotional weight of others. Now you know how to say no, and Aries, that no was the most sacred yes you've ever given yourself. Yes to truth, yes to your own light, yes to never compromising your soul, just to stay where real love no longer exists. The final lesson is always about freedom. Not external freedom, but inner liberation from roles you've outgrown. It's you, walking out of the old room, where you once begged for love and stepping into an open sky, where you now know real love doesn't need to be begged for. It only asks for your true presence. Aries, you've finally learned that even if people leave, even if the silence breaks your heart, the light inside you is still there. You no longer need anyone to choose you because you've chosen yourself. And when you choose yourself, everything meant for you, from work to wealth to love, will begin to choose you back. This is the first step of a whole new chapter, a chapter where you stop repeating old lessons, a chapter where you no longer live to fix others, but to rebuild yourself. From the roots, walk slowly, but firmly, because the door that just opened isn't meant to pull you back to old patterns, it's calling you forward, into a reality that matches your true energy. You've seen the truth, you've made it through, now it's time to live, with your light fully revealed. Thank you, Aries, for staying with this journey to the very end, even when your heart was tired, even when your faith was shaken. You kept going, not for someone else, but because your soul already knew. You are worthy of a life that is full, deep, and true. May you always protect that flame. Never trade it just to be accepted, because that light is the most sacred thing you have, and it will lead you to the right place, to the right people, at the right time. May truth be your armor, and peace the home you always return to. And may these words find you just when you need them most.